All right.
All right, so I have a short structure. I will start talking a bit about my trajectory in career and academia, the motivation for the thesis, research focus, and some shorter the theoretical foundation, and then dive into the case study that I did. I hope I didn't prepare too much material. Might need to rush a bit at the end, but let's see. Okay, so I finished my thesis in game studies this spring at Tuni, and at the moment I'm working in qualitative data in a corporate job. And my academic background is I have a major in cultural anthropology that is pretty interesting when we look at how the discipline formed up and how it is locally different from when I talked with people. I studied this in Germany and then the game studies master here in Finland. My research interests are digital games, diversity and representation, game production, intersectionality, then tools and software solutions for complex issues and character studies. Then some of my private interests, you can read them if you want. And this is my dog already in Christmas mood. Yes. So the motivation was to find a thesis topic that connects research interests of mine. This was initially really difficult as I did not want to dive into Overwatch because I was thinking a lot about the perspective of entering a topic from a researcher position with an initial distance. But Overwatch at this time of study was one of my most played video games at that time. But with some brainstorming and talking through potential topics with Jolene Blom, she helped me a lot in kind of navigating and lead that led to the idea to look at one phenomenon, which is a diversity tool that was presented online in a Blizzard blog post, heavily coined for Overwatch, even though most likely working for all Blizzard games. These steps would allow me then to look at this phenomenon more closely and actually take on this distance perspective that I wanted, while my knowledge about the community, the media mix in Overwatch, and the game itself would still help greatly with that study. I really wanted to do character studies, and I could still do it with this. And with the methods approach, it would not strongly require me to interact extensively with the game that I already played for hours to come, but rather interact with the object of research and engage with representations of characters in both the tool and the game's hero gallery. Right. So the research focus was this tool that I just mentioned called the King's Diversity Space, and it is supposed to facilitate character and narrative design processes. And I wanted to study this as one phenomenon of game culture, additionally contextualized and situated in game production studies. The focus of studying this tool was primarily as a sociocultural artifact. So that was the very first point. But additionally situated in within this game production studies, it was really important for me to also look at it through organizations and the individuals that are tightly connected to game making and Overwatch 2. My research question was, can a discourse of diversity be enacted within and onto a game? With a smaller sub-question that was more methodological, but what meaning making can content analysis of the King's Diversity Space tool reveal? I'm gonna go a bit faster on that one, but the foundation of theory was basically intersectionality theory, intertwined with the theories of additional theories of diversity and representation, that included a view on societal categories for better conceptual understanding of the categories that are present in this tool. I hope that I can show this to you on the next slide. It was really necessary to look at this more closely and to really get behind these individual layers of the tool. Right, so here's some visualization. On the left-hand side, we see a really early prototype, And on the right-hand side, there is a more sophisticated model, definitely functional, to what purpose it ever gets used. I hope we can see some of the categories outlined here. Like on the top, for example, is culture. So there are some societal categories, but at the same time, there are also things like body type, what else? Face, age, socioeconomic background. So quite complex things. And yeah, for the unit of analysis, I wanted to look beyond this framework of the tool and really understand the intended use, game production, and situate it outside, not outside, beyond the context it was presented initially, which was a PR blog post by Activision Blizzard. And then it became noticeable in the comparison of these theories that I used, that how they relate to these societal categories and concepts. And a lot of them discuss power structures and bodies, where I was building on classics of Foucault, Hall, Crenshaw, and Shaw, which utilize these theories of diversity, of representation, and the governing of the body. Then, after you have seen the tool, how I approached this was basically through a deep analysis of the tool itself, with specific detailed pictures on the web that were used to being analyzed. I did consider to do a digital walkthrough of the tool, which is a method that has a strong potential in the study of applications and tools. It is similar to a close reading in form of a technical walkthrough, where the researcher would basically interact with all layers of the interface. But due to access issues and obstacles, this remained more of a mention. It still helped me a lot with thorough descriptions and interpretations of the images. And then I conducted content analysis with material that supported it, that also contextualized the understanding of the data, which was an older GDC talk where they did a workshop session with this tool. And then another method that I used in the case study framework was an expert interview with Mikael Jakobsson, a researcher and designer that was involved in a early MIT project collaboration with King. And this resulted in various tool prototypes and finally leading to what was also presented in this PR blog post. And yes, then bringing all layers together, I found that there was a strong disconnect between research of the projects, the designed intent, and also the praising of the tool in the PR post that gave similar vibes to as, yes, we solved the issue of representation in video games. And yes, so after the use of this case study framework and understanding how the characters are and bodies are represented in the digital game, how they are designed, and also how the narratives of diversity in Overwatch 2 connect or disconnect with the context of game production, and most importantly, with the people that actually create for Activision Blizzard. So, having followed the federal state lawsuit and investigation of California against Activision Blizzard before and during my thesis process, added quite a lot of context to these official narratives of the game company, where the lawsuit focused on unequal opportunities, sexual harassment cases against women and non-binary game industry workers. What I found out in analyzing the data is that there is a major disconnect of how the tool has been presented through official game developer blog posts and the project's designed intent. Because in this collaboration project that had like the research perspective, that the designed intent was through guided workshop sessions. So if you don't have this information, it already gets pretty confusing about like to understand the complexities of the tool. And these guided workshop sessions would also use complementary readings of literature, including readings of Adrian Shaw, and getting a closer understanding of the categories that are reflected in the tool. With this disconnect, I describe diversity as a marketable commodity through game design and game making processes, as the tool itself was also a showcase post that was praising these levels of diversities in the character of Overwatch. While I had a hypothesis that focused strongly on design criticisms, that intersectional perspectives were really hard to grasp. I found that with the analysis and understanding the designed intent, it is possible to see the intersectional perspective if we think about it, that a group of people work with this tool and they use complementary readings of these theories. Yes, and how do they connect to our theme today? Like, I also said that in the thesis that there's a heavy potential for misunderstanding and misuse of the tool, which relates to this major lack of framing by Blizzard that can also potentially be harmful. The blog post itself was updated several times due to major community backlash and criticisms of the broader public. One thing that I then also pointed out is that the tool visualizes diverse characters and bodies, while the majority of the character pool still remains heteronormative and is not showcased, because if you want to showcase this diversity tool, you would probably opt for the selected characters that rank quite high on the individual categories. What I found important to the topic today for today's research talk is that about games and the body is that the norm needs to be constructed in the use of this tool as a first step. The project itself was heavily criticized and also taken out of context, but through the interview I found out that it was a grassroots project that was actually started by women game industry workers, then advanced through research collaboration. So people that really were searching for this, like let's create something good. And we can see that there is a vision and a call for change within and outside of the games, where kind of the finalization or disruption of the project, however one wants to call this, disconnects from its presented iteration. Yes, it was not showcased in the tool. And then I wrote that the body as a contextualized category can, for example, show how game industry workers are treated, how video game characters become embodied representations of diversity, and what meaning lies behind the connection of structures of complexity in this tool. So when I answered the research question, I said, without reflecting on one's own bias and contextually situated normativity, it's impossible to enact a discourse of diversity. It is a complex process that the tool cannot really solve for us. We can use it to facilitate, to visualize the understanding of complex concepts, or also tackle unconscious bias, but we can't be taught this kind of like complex meanings of overlapping categories, and we cannot expect that like a game designer takes on this task alone, if that makes sense. And yeah. There was like heavy study limitations, but I don't know how the time looks, if we are still good. But I think we can also head to the discussion. So thank you for listening.
Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Max. And it's really nice to see what you've done after like finding out about the tool. I was wondering now, do you maybe I missed it a little bit, but do you know if that tool is now actively being used by a company or by an institution? Is it actually still around? Yeah.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yeah, it's super interesting. There are also parts that I did not take up in the thesis because it was getting too large. But when I had the expert interview, I also got insight in a small presentation that was kind of internal. So I didn't dare to use this material, but there is like basically prototypes that are still around, and the experts said they're using paper prototypes in teaching their game design classes at MIT, which is super interesting. But industry-wise, it's like really obscure. Like um, there's not much on the webs, like not much happened. There's some discussions on Reddit that just died down because there's not more information beyond that after the major backlash. But yeah, I don't think it's accessible. I'm still waiting for it. Maybe it's interesting. Like I also wrote them that it would be super interesting to actually do this digital walkthrough and interact with every single layer of this tool. I hope this answered the question.
Hmm. Yeah. Please.
Yeah, when you showed the pictures of the sort of web graph that was used with the tool, there were these categories like culture on the one end or like ethnicity on the other. And I'm just really curious about how they determined how much ethnicity someone had. Like, oh, you are 60% ethnicity, 100% ethnicity. Do you did you get to know how that actually worked? Like, how did they determine that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I picked that up several times because um, in these design sessions, the focus is kind of both narrative and visual representation. So in this case, we have in the complex version the game character Anna, and there are some parameters, right? So let's say you asked about ethnicity, right? Like maybe I can visualize it on one example that I look closely at. I think in gender, for example, they decided, okay, a male is like, I think 0, a female is like 5, and like non-binary would be 10. So these categories like seem really arbitrary, right? Um, and the expert also said that we shouldn't focus on that because they actually asked Blizzard to take the numbers out. They said, we don't want the metrics, but corporates are like, we want the numbers, we want to see them all. So basically, the design and researcher kind of made this recommendation, corporate ignored it. So there's not a strong meaning at how they determine these levels, I think.
Thank you.
So you kind of mentioned that you feel like the tool broke down for its purpose. I was kind of wondering, did you conclude that you feel like the tool itself had like an absurd concept that no tool could have done better or worse at the goal, or that like some particular part of this tool broke down?
I think that's a tough one, but I think what I talk mainly about is this disruption for the specific tool. Uh, Can someone mute their microphone, please? Able to mute them, right? I'm not sure.
Mas o menino que trabalha comigo lá, ele é da minha eletrônica. Aí ele falou que tem.
Thank you. Yeah, that was kind of this disruption was mainly based at that there was a deadline and then it was delivered, right? And then it got pulled and there was also legal steps. But yeah, I still need to answer this question for myself, right? Like, what can these tools, what purpose can they serve us? Like, if they're supposed to facilitate and they're used in the correct context, and this seemed to be for the game design classes like a really elaborate process, right? You have academic readings, you have multiple people that sit around it and dive into it. So that is a major difference of if you think, okay, it's a single game designer that drags around like graphs from left to right. But yeah, so I still need to think more about that.
I think that's about all of our time. So thank you very much, Max. All right, next we have Ville is going to be giving a presentation. So let's see. Yeah. Down into the thing. From start. All right. So whenever you are ready, please
All
be
right.
invited to.
Yeah. So my name is Ville-Veikko Ulgren, and I'm working as a researcher at Tampere University in gamification group, same as Oz. And mine is more about this kind of related to nature and this kind of adding this gamified layer for the nature things. And one of the kind of easiest way to do this, because these days everyone is always carrying the cell phone with them, so it's part of you these days. And I kind of divided into two ones, because the first one is kind of about my master thesis anyway, kind of this natural track application that I made, and it's about this collecting nature data in the form of images and GPS locations and whatnot. And the second one is the current one I'm currently working on, again about nature, and how can we use this kind of like LiDARs from the newest devices and record more different things from there, and how can we actually then play things in the forest together with our trees or different nature elements. If you can click the next one. So basically, if anyone has played Pokemon Go, it might look a little bit familiar. So the idea we took some kind of inspiration from the Pokemon Go, but the idea was to do a totally different thing. You don't collect anything out from the map itself. The idea is that it would motivate you to go to different nature locations, because there was this kind of research gap. Most of the location-based things are made for the urban environment. I want to go to the library, there's GPS route for there. And if you want to, let's say, go to McDonald's or go to the university, it kind of highlights you the right route there. So we wanted the people to be more motivated to go out of the forest, and how could they then collect this kind of nature data. I saw this really nice tree, there was this flower that I saw, or I want to find mushrooms. So the core idea was, with this game, you are the one who's doing the exploring and finding the new interesting things from there. And the one problem is kind of the wildlife or the nature area is kind of missing. So this was the biggest gap in there. So you can click the next one. So in this kind of be designed upon this super simple system that people can take images of what did they saw. And sadly, most people played this during winter, so not much things to see. Only tracks, different tracks, and then some people during the summer they saw bunnies. And of course, this can then, because we were kind of interested in playing the game, and it was kind of cold, as you can see, people did not really go to the forest. So they kind of stayed on the Tampere area so far. Some people walked on the ice, and there was this kind of like incentive to kind of maybe add an additional layer later on, how to motivate people even further. You can click the next one. So basically, kind of the most interesting findings in this one was kind of people, even though one only person would play the game, they would invite their friends along. So this kind of the social experience came up really randomly. It was kind of an interesting thing and the finding. And then there was this kind of connection with the nature, because people mentioned that they discovered new things from the map itself, because we used a 3D map instead of 2D. So they could actually, hey, there's a lake next to me that I didn't even know existed. So there was this kind of like a sense of discovery And of course, all kinds of design elements and different implementations and tons of feedback came from the users. Next one. So moving from the just taking images from the nature itself, we kind of thought about how can we have more like this kind of different technological approach. So since from iPhone 12, if I remember correctly, they had the LiDAR scanner in these devices. So one opportunity came from this one. How could we make the games in a way that the idea would to be played in a forest environment? And then we have this kind of Unite project going, and this GamiLiDAR project started from there. How can we record different kind of trees, because the forestry is like really, really huge business in Finland. And then we have some collaboration with Eastern University of Finland. And then this idea came from there that we could do this kind of games that are only played in these forests. Next one. So we have these different types of proof of concept. So the first one started from just how can we scan. Sorry.
You can speak to everybody in the room. I
Okay,
can
sorry.
speak-
I'm looking at that way. If I remember what I'm going to be saying. So basically, the idea is how can we actually scan? So we can we can utilize the game engines and whatnot to scan actually the thing from the nature. And then we got all the things running, and all those steps was what kind of game should we be making? Then there was this kind of like spider game that you could collect spiders in the forest and different environments. And then at the same time, the game would be scanning all the time when you're playing the game. And then third option came this kind of idea that what if we could like mark down different trees, and if there's like a climate, because climate change is happening. So if you see a tree that they might have a beetle problem or something, you put a red X there, that's now marked down, you could share the location, and all the other people could also see it. But then we wanted to move even more further. I'll actually demo on my phone if anyone wants to play. So we made this like a UFO game that you are a person that came all somewhere from deep space, and you would be collecting these small robots and data collection units in the forest itself. So you'd be roaming around, taking images with the LiDAR scan, and you would have this kind of limited amount of access that you can. Basically, you're flying a drone in the forest, going up and down. But if you click the next one, so then we kind of felt because this game didn't really work as intended, because we were always looking down from the device. So the next step of iteration is to how can we make even things more like you would do things with the trees, the different objects in the forest. So the idea is to maybe next thing is this kind of tower defense game. So the trees are your friends. So you go even more closer to the trees, and then you scan them. And now that because we can use the data that we get, we could place different like game elements into the trees itself. So you would play this kind of like either tower defense game or some other similar ones. I took tons of inspiration from the tower defense game. If anyone has played Kingdom Rush, so if you click the next one. So the idea is that we could place things there, and because like I mentioned climate change, one idea is to include this kind of awareness, playful different ways, different kind of creatures that would be kind of playing against, and maybe have this kind of like collaborative layer with the other players. And if you click next one, so this is actually the thing that we get from there with the LiDAR data. So this is quite precise. So you can see on the left side, this is actually tree. The diameter is 43 centimeters, is 1 centimeter precise, the actual LiDAR scan. And if you click the next one, and this is only from like, let's say 3 minutes of gameplay, we can get plenty of data. And the gray thing in the background, we call it mesh, if anyone knows games or game design. So we can hide basically the mesh, and you cannot go through it when you're actually playing the game. So the whole forest and areas are actually the whole game area or the playable area for you. And this is also one of the data points that we get from the game. And you could move all around. It doesn't need to be forest. You could play anywhere. But it kind of this embodiment that you are not only restricted to one place to play the game. This is my really short.
Any questions? Doop, doop. I guess one question I have, so you said you took a lot of inspiration from like various like digital games.
Yes.
Right, played on screen. Did
Yeah.
you, when people were testing this or play testing it, did you see any key differences in play style between them physically being in a forest, engaging these kinds of mechanics versus when they play on a screen, like with Kingdom Rush or any of those other games?
Yes, I think because the point in these games was to kind of like motivate you go outside, and we are interested about the data itself. So people would always have lots of questions, especially if you're like a native person, and then would have like, hey, do you know, is there a way to identify this plant? Or is there like, can I go to the forest and play? And because we have the every man's rights in Finland, some were really confused that actually I can play anywhere. So there was this kind of like social aspects were there, kind of like one of the interesting findings there.
Yes. It's ridiculous. I'm asking because I'm part of kind of.
Yeah.
But so I think like one of the aim is to create this forest models.
Yeah.
So, and I think that was to aid somehow forestry industry.
Yeah, forest industry is like probably going to be, or basically one of the partners in these. So because they are interested, of course, money. And in Finland, if you cut down trees, you have to also plant them. It's not just about the money and destruction of the nature. But they are also kind of, they have their own agenda, of course, and they wish to have, of course, you need to plant more. So it's not just the destruction.
Like, did you show any of those scans that you made to these forest kind of people? Or,
Yeah.
You know, did they find it useful? Or?
They actually find it useful because the problem is these days, if you want to have like an actual forest scan, it costs like 10,000 euros or more. But this device is like 1,000 euros. So the idea is have more like feasible and more accessible way of getting the data. And I don't know the huge difference between the data quality and for like if you would have your favorite spot in the forest, you could use this kind of other like applications to record your favorite spot, and then you could also see it in the VR. So you would have your own digitalized forest.
So is the concept to produce a game or gamified app, players play it, and then that data is sold to forestry companies?
That
like a
could
way of
be
mapping
sold,
the forest?
or if the forest companies want to use the game,
Sure, with
so then they can use the game, and with the same amount kind of money, that would be easier and more feasible to get the data itself. Or if you are a forest owner, and if you want to know what's happening in your own forest, you could play the games there, and then you could look at the data, what was there, like, hey, this tree is not probably doing that well, I should cut it down for the benefit of the whole forest.
Yako asks, are there rural physical games or play practices that were key influences? And does the data collection somehow benefit the player?
So far, the data collection in a way does, because it's more about the game elements that you get some bonuses and whatnot, not really any other way that is kind of like giving any other benefits. And
does physical games and their play practices have any influences on your design? I take it.
A little bit. because there, of course, are limits how well your internet connection works in really rural areas. But I think in Finland, in general, they do work pretty well. And there might be some, how do you say, physical obstacles that you might not get through with this kind of games if there's like the forest is too dense. But I think there are like not that many games that actually do the same. There's this gamified application crowdsourcer that does the same, but it's still a digital game. So there's no actual physical games in that sense. Yes.
Do the players get any monetary reward when their data is being sold to a company?
I don't know. That's one possibility because it's going to have this continuation for the Gaming project at some point. And that might be done in more hand in hand with the companies, but this is more like personalized testing, volunteering. So it's not just about selling the data. But if you would be a forest owner, I would assume, then you would pay for the players itself in some kind of monetary content. Or if people are just interested about the nature itself, so then you might do it for free. Of course, this crowdsourcing and this like citizen science.
One thing I always feel like when comparing like natural environments to digital created environments is that natural environments are just like insanely complex.
Yeah.
And incredibly complicated in a way that a lot of games just can't recreate, or maybe it's not even helpful to recreate.
Yeah.
How did you find this kind of complexity of the forest beneficial or a challenge for your game's design when you're trying to build an interesting game?
Yeah, that's actually one problem that we that I saw a couple of slides over there, because the next game we were kind of thinking about how can we get more data from the nature itself. So we can have to kind of think about like how do we design the game in a way that the people are interested playing it, and then how can we get more data out of it. So it should be kind of like combination of, let's say you have trees, you could only place things to the trees when they're like specific height. So we could kind of incorporate this kind of like really rudely said this forest science into the game design. So it's kind of have to do it hand in hand.
Okay, so they're kind of two different priorities.
Yeah, there are two different
that you could kind
priorities,
of
keep
mix.
it fun, and then the actual science behind it. Yes.
I'm reading the book, I think it's by Ellen DeShane, it's A Playing Nature. And I
Yeah.
think one of the like points that I was really inspired by was the fact that in a lot of games, nature is just a beautiful backdrop or something I as a player can use for resources. And I just realized that I haven't played one game when I can just hug a tree for something, for example. So I think this is maybe.
Yeah, that's also one our goal, because of course in our mind there's just like environmental protection. The idea is not to destroy the nature. It's kind of like digital games, you would not be causing any harm. So you would be doing the things together with the nature. So it's kind of cooperative player again. So let's say this is my favorite tree. I want to play some things with my favorite tree. That's giving us this kind of like different aspects for the nature. Maybe humanizing a little bit also.
When you had the version where you were like painting on the tree, was like were other players then able to see the painting you put on that tree?
Not yet.
Okay.
But one of the ideas maybe also do it a little bit further, because we also have this idea why, because we did it in the nature first, and it could be also used in urban environment. So it could be used in both. And there was couple conferences, met some artistic people, so you could kind of do your own drawing book basically and share it to your friends. That would be kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting scientific findings could be also found from there.
Is this like a genre of game? Like, do forest companies, are there many LiDAR kind of like building the forest? AR?
Niantic has this application, the same company that made the Pokemon Go. They have the Scaniverse. Again, I actually talked with the Niantic people, and this is for, again, urban environment. So there are not that many games towards like nature. itself, or you would be playing nature. It's highly limited. Also, like I mentioned, the crowdsourcer, it's again mapping things in the urban cities and whatnot.
Sure.
So there's not that many. But Finnish, I think the read some of the like was it Luke, and they do have something like this, how to spot invasive species, but it's only like web-based and it's not really a game. So you just inform that I saw these bugs or whatnot. So there's this kind of gap also there for like nature games.
I think that's all of our time. So thank you so much. Yeah. All right, next. And Oz, let me share your presentation. Mhm. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Ah, okay, great. There we go. Sorry. Slideshow, play from start. All right.
Cool. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Oz, and I'm an assistant professor of gameful experience in Tampere University, and I work in Research Center of Gameful Realities and directing Gameful Features Lab. And today, we'll talk about what games that play with augmented bodies, I think, through explaining wearables. Well, let's go to the next slide. And wearables, like maybe little questions. Also get a bit ping pong. What are they? Just give me an example of a wearable that you know of.
Apple Watch.
Apple Watch.
The,
Great.
the rings.
Yes, exactly.
Attract you.
Those will also not take so much time. I will show them to you. So we can just go to here, the next one, and just keep clicking. Yes, and these, like, of course, smartwatches, there's some smart glasses. A lot of people think that maybe not immediately think of headphones when we talk about wearables, but they are, and they have been with us for a long time. And for example, virtual reality glasses is, of course, a very prominent one these days. But I will show you something more interesting. This is this thing called Monarchs. That's also wearable. And I want you to guess, one of you, what this is, what this does. Oh, most probably.
Makes you look like an alien.
Yeah. Good. Like, maybe one more guess, and then we can go on. Most mosquito repellent. Most probably, yeah. The thing with that, like, it is connected to your bicep muscles, and when you contract them, you flap those things. And they are actually designed for social interaction with a really ambiguous aim of, I don't know, you decide what to do with them. It might be maybe you're in a role-playing game and you just want to puff your shoulders to make your body bigger to intimidate the other player. Or maybe you're so interested about my presentation and you just, wow, that's so good. You decide. But that's about it. And there are a lot of other examples that I can show, but again, for the sake of time, the thing that these kind of variables, and actually all variables brings is in the next slide, the self-expression. The wearable technologies, I think the bigger difference of them from any other kinds of technologies, they're integrated to your body. And of course, that allows them to maybe then collect some data from your body, but they are mostly visible to others. That means that they're kind of building your identity similar to your other clothes. So while choosing your smartwatch, most probably there's a bit more consideration about the color of it, or maybe the strap of it, or other things. while it's a really small technology, it might still be, you might think, okay, I'm going to this, I don't know, Karanka today with really nice clothes. Should I wear my smartwatch or maybe the other one that looks a bit more formal and so on? So these might be all considerations that goes into wearable technologies. And how it connects to games. So there are some wearables for games. For example, this Pip-Boy. I think maybe some of you know about this Fallout game, which actually goes in this post-apocalyptic United States terrain after a nuclear war. Wow. And like most of the characters or most of the NPCs and your own avatar wears these things called Pip-Boys that tracks your vitals and other things. And in the game, when you, for example, press inventory, your character does that, and you can find your inventory there. So what actually Bethesda did, they added a real version of that to the collector edition of Fallout 4 that you can buy, and you can put your phone inside, and you can start interacting with your inventory and other things through your arm. The self-expression translates to games as identity and identification with your avatar and your imaginary character. And here, this is what they're playing on. So to bring one item on your body to kind of have a more transfer and identification with the thing that you're controlling in your screen. We have this other one, for example, here, which is a kind of a Nintendo Switch Labo robot kit. It's actually a cardboard kit that you do. And by kind of pulling the strings, you can kind of control this robot here. And this robot has actually almost kind of the same things in the back of this backpack. Although they're not really functional in the game, they made it in the same way to create this identification between the character and the player. And again, maybe some self-expression node in Pokemon Go that can connect to the previous one. This is called Pokemon Go Plus. And it is attachable to your either bracelet or your basically maybe your clothing, however you like. And it kind of, I think, shows how a good Pokemon trainer you are, because you're invested in that, meaning that you always want to catch Pokemons without looking at your screen all the time, I guess. And they kind of really also they didn't make it something hidden. They could have done something in your pocket when you click, when there are vibrations about Pokemons, but they made it something that shows others that you're a Pokemon trainer in this Pokemon Go. So this is how it goes. But there's not much actually other examples that I can talk about when it comes to wearables and games. There are some really historical examples from Nintendo times, but they're not really so much contemporary ones. So we asked this question to understand how can we design playful wearables. And while answering that, we kind of actually designed a lot of wearable projects, but we also found ourselves to kind of writing this book about playful wearables. So this is a very extensive book that kind of looks into many different things. And there's some, for example, frameworks and methods of doing different projects and case studies if you want to get more information. But I will show you the framework that kind of actually led towards that book in the next slide. So what we found after kind of drawing on these different interesting projects that used wearables as part of games, we found that wearables can be can serve for performative purposes, meaning that there can be different aspects of it about how you perform with your body to kind of relate yourself to this imaginary world of games. It can also kind of facilitate social play. Maybe we can just also keep pushing buttons so I can tell different things about them. For example, again, we can keep pushing.
Okay.
There should be some pictures popping up. Actually went to another screen. So much. But anyway, like while they're coming at, actually this is also pretty self-explanatory. But maybe we can focus on, let's say, social play instead of talking about all of them. For example, wearables can, okay, now we can keep pushing. They can be something more imaginary or more immersive. For example, in this one, we designed it in a way that you become a witch when you wear them. So there is not so much to maybe imagine because it's very obvious that you're a witch, but it can be done otherwise. We can just give that to people and want them to role play it. When it comes to social play, for example, they can facilitate with the tight social interactions with each other. If I have a sensor in here and also in the back of the other player, and if for the game, if we want to bring them back, we have to maybe hug each other and so on. So they can facilitate those kind of interactions or more distant interactions, such as it was in COVID. And actually, there were really gameful masks at that time, right? In the next one, we had this razor, very colorful mask that shows that I guess you're a gamer, must probably have an RGB keyboard at home. So this is kind of also giving the message of others from far, from a more relaxed situation to communicate. An interactive plane tells about it. Either you can interact around your body, out from your body to outside with wearables, or on your body by looking at the things. For example, in this Wear PG, there is this little interesting things that you can interact on your body instead of around your body. So these were basically, it was a little design space explaining what kind of affordances wearables can bring. But from then on, I mean, these were all the projects. We go to future to understand actually how we can augment our bodies with wearables and what is it in for games. In the next slides, or maybe even the next two slides. So here in the chapter 6 of the book, we talk about augmented bodies, and what we claim there is every wearable, one way or another, augments the body. Even a simple watch is turning your body surface into a surface that tells you this precise time that you are in, which is otherwise a bit hard to guess. Or even the simplest tracker for step counter or for your speed gives you information about how fast you are, although you can, of course, sense it kind of proprioceptively by inside of yourself. It's not possible to understand it exactly. So they are actually augmenting even in the most simplest interactions that they are bringing. So what we have did here, for example, about augmented bodies, I will show you a project called Wear PG, which was actually my PhD project around 10 years ago. So in this project, we designed these wearables where you can play tabletop role-playing games by moving your body instead of just tossing dice and talking. In that one, for example, first, if you click once more, you play a movement-based game with your wearables, augmented dice. In here, this player tries to cast a spell, and if they're successful in the game, the probabilities in the dice change. For example, if they're more successful, there are more green sides in the dice. If they're less successful, there are more red sides, and then they toss the dice. And they can play different scenarios such as, I don't know, precision. If they want to shoot an arrow, they can play that game. If they want to hit somewhere, they can play the power game, and so on and so on. So the game master decides what they do with those. And what happened here, so how it connects to the augmented body, is we created this game design pattern called skill bits. It means that you can add your body little bits that would somehow make believe that you're augmented. In this one, when we add this here, like there's element stone, if you're, for example, using fire element, when you add that, it starts to pulse in red and kind of starts to vibrate to actually make player believe that, okay, now you have the powers. And at that moment, also in the character skills, you can see your new skills that is brought by this. And it's a kind of a simple interaction, but in the narrative of the game, it kind of induced players that now you have the power and now you're kind of augmented. And one interesting thing that we did afterwards, we actually kind of interviewed the designers of those interesting games. For example, in this one, you wear a wearable robot. This robot feeds some food to the other player. If the player is happy with the food, if the player is not happy with the food, it feeds back to you. And so it is kind of an interesting playful interaction around those. And there are other projects, and Monarch was one of them too that I have showed in the beginning. And what we found that these bodily extensions can be designed in different playful ways. For example, if we go to the next slide, we can again, like we had a lot of teams and little sub-teams to explain how we can augment our bodies in playful ways.
Meeting chat is very aggressive.
Yeah, and it actually kind of like one of the things I know what's here, so I don't have to look. So one thing is that we can socially augment or kind of use this bodily extensions as new social organs that we do not have, and they can actually augment our social interactions with people. But I mean, I'm not really talking about augmentation in a very functional way, but more playful way that transforms our social interaction. Does it go? Oh, okay, yeah, they're here. So one thing that we found, for example, there was they can actually make you develop a new language. If we had this monarchs, for example, that I showed between me and you, maybe we could just flap it to each other, and then other people may not understand. Maybe it might be excitement, but it might also mean that, oh, this presentation is nonsense. And then maybe we have these little signals about them, and this bodily extensions might kind of facilitate that. And even some of the designers told that they actually loaded some kind of behaviors on them, like they were in a dance party and they just bopped with them like that. And they also told they were a bit introverts, so they are not usually very comfortable to move with their own bodies. So it was kind of a relief for them to, show off their things and kind of have a bit more kind of extrovert attitude to these extensions, which then also, of course, reflect back on you. Now we can go to our kind of next slide. This kind of augmented body, or kind of, let's say, if we think that augmenting our bodies can also take us towards a bit more trans-species plane, it's very interesting to me to understand how we can play. Maybe I can just go there because these slides are a little bit playful also. Yeah, okay. So instead of getting questions, then I'll ask you some questions because I'm very curious. If we have all those bodily augmentations, if we have spaces that allow us to play while having those bodily augmentations, what kind of games would we play? What kind of games can we design and develop if we were augmented humans, let's say, cognitively, bodily, or emotionally, or sensorially? And what kind of experiential aspects of bodily augmentations can be discovered through games and play? So can we design games so that we can understand how we would feel if we were augmented? And can we understand actually future post-human societies by designing those games and reading them, reading their rules, reading how they're played, reading how people behave within these rules? Can we have an idea of future societies? So yeah, these are the questions that I leave you with, and yeah, thank you.
Great. Cool. Any responses to these questions?
Yeah. Yeah.
Response to the last question. You showed it.
Yeah.
Isn't that kind of like the response is more like, aren't you shaping the post-human society by designing the game?
That's a very good question, and we might be doing that. And so in our lab, we use speculative design and design fiction a lot to design basically not only artifacts, but how basically surroundings around these artifacts might change, or why can we have these artifacts? And definitely by designing them, we might shape. But actually, we're mostly shaping today because we're kind of projecting the future from the lens of today, and future might be totally different from our understandings of how it will be in the future. So it is actually mostly going there, understanding what it might be, and then reflecting back today, and then maybe change some practices, which then again, of course, will be changing also future.
Yeah, it's just that question. I cannot ask it without thinking. You're shaping it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and maybe the aim is that actually, because we might want to know how our current behavior might shape future. And if there's something that we don't like, we might want to change some of our practices today to shape it. So that's exactly it. And it can be used games to maybe understand it in a more experiential aspect rather than utilitarian or functional ways. Yeah.
When it comes to like how people play with their bodies, right, in physical play, I feel like a lot of it has to do with like this kind of proprioception and sensation that they get from their body parts. How have you found that role fitting into your playful wearable design in future? Because even if I can dance with my shoulder wings, I don't feel them dancing in the same way.
Yeah.
So how have you run into that?
In this last interview project that I had shown, we actually looked at through the lens of body schema and body image. And especially body schema comes into play with proprioception, about how you understand where your body parts and how they're organized in the space. And I think there are different things. Like one of them is also identity transformation. For example, there was this tale that I have shown to you, and there is also this scholar in our field whose name is Christina Hög, who works a lot with some aesthetics. And she tried that, and she kind of also talked about how it kind of affected how she thinks about her femininity, because she kind of transformed into this more cat-like attitude while walking and using her hips and so on. So, you know, this proprioception that is changed by this tale and how it affected how you changed how to use your body, that changed what your identity is, not changed, but made you reflect on it. And identity is, of course, a very complicated context, and in this case, I think it was more about gender identity there. So it would most probably have profound effects if you use them all the time and change your proprioception from the get-go, kind of.
Very much on that note, I was interested when you talked about the performance and the other two, but like specifically with regards to performance, because you did mention it, but I would like to hear more about it. Like, how have you designed some of the wearables that you did to sort of embody different types of performance and subjectivities? Like how do they? Like I would just like to know more examples.
So, for example, in one of the projects that is included in the book, it is called True Colors, and it's a wearable that you wear, and it has a little keypad in the back, in a place where you cannot actually reach. And in there, when this wearable starts kind of blinking in red, it means that you're overloaded in this live action role playing scenario, and someone have to fix you from this keypad. You cannot do it because you cannot see it and you cannot reach it. You cannot even recognize what are the keys there. So then this kind of creates this performance of you being weak. You're in need of somebody, and augments the vulnerability of your body so that someone can come and help you to overcome that. So, for example, that's a little example of how it was designed. This is a project of my colleague. And in the one that RPG that I designed, we specifically wanted people to feel when they attach the stone, there is some power flow to their body. And actually, we observed some players to do some stuff after wearing that, such as, like this and kind of looking at it. So it was a role-playing game. Of course, they were in the role, but it also allowed them to maybe perform it more bodily by understanding how it kind of flows into their body and so on. So like these little interactions helped to reflect on their bodily abilities on that. Yeah.
And I think that is all of our official time for today, but of course there's still time afterwards casually and bars that exist. So big round of applause for us. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody who attended online. Yeah, we will have our next talk on December 20th. As mentioned before, on games and colonialism. That will be happening at the Oasis space at Tampere University. Due to scheduling things, we will have Shuvik Mukherjee there, and Michael Jakobsen will be flying in from where he normally lives in MIT. Yes, and we will probably have two other people we don't know yet. Yes, but if you'd like to join us, we would love to have you. Great, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Oz and Wille and Max online. Great, and we will wrap up the call now. Goodbye, internet people. Goodbye, goodbye. We stop.